yeah, by the time this interview is out, Reacher is going to be out. So congratulations on that. How has this release been for you, and how has it been building up to it?
Yes, the build up to the release has been somewhat strange for me, just because when we were filming the show itself, it was still in the midst of COVID, and particularly in Ontario, the authorities where we were filming in Canada were you know, we were in strict lockdown, and testing was very rigorous. And my wife was pregnant at the time, and I wasn't. She lived in Los Angeles, where I live, so I wasn't able to go back and see her. So it was 4 months of relative isolation and lockdown, with occasional sort of trips to set where we'd go and we'd shoot this TV show. And my character is a small but important role, and so I crop up usually like once an episode, and I'm just a dick to various people when I leave. So from that perspective of just it was such a particular experience and such a sort of specific kind of experience that I kind of phased out the fact that this, you know, Reacher is a huge franchise, and it's very popular. I was very much sort of nose to the grindstone, just focusing on the next scene, you know, the next episode, trying to do as good a job as possible, trying to honor the material, you know, trying to engage with the other actors in the right way. And then, of course, you go into post-production, and I've subsequently shot another show actually up in Canada again. And so you just move on, and then you all of a sudden, I'm in a position now where literally in the last sort of week or so, you know, I've started to see trailers have been coming out, and then there are big billboards featuring Alan's humongous physique, you know, above the 10 freeway, and I've got friends posting me little like Instagram pictures of wherever they are in the world, seeing a trailer or a poster, and all of a sudden it becomes something a lot more tangible and a lot more like, oh, this is actually happening. And that brings with it its own set of anxieties because you know, it's been out of your hands for so long, and you're like, wait a second, what did I do again? I hope people like it. I hope the fans like it. So yeah, it's obviously it's very exciting, and but yes, it's just been a bit surreal, and but yes, I'm excited about seeing the final product and seeing hopefully a positive reaction from the fans of the franchise.
I mean, this franchise, as you said, is huge. There's books, there's the movies that came before this show, and now there's this new Amazon Prime show. Were you yourself a fan of this series before you booked the role?
No, I wasn't, and not out of just out of ignorance. I was aware of Lee Child. I didn't know Lee Child was actually British. He's an Englishman, and he writes these sort of American action fairy tales so very well. And so it was actually after I'd been offered the role that I started to read the source material, the Killing Floor, which is the first Reacher novel. And I purposely, I think I'd seen the first movie many years ago when it first came out, but I purposely didn't revisit that because I knew that we were doing something purposefully. We were going to try and do something a little bit closer to what the actual source material, the book was. And again, I think but I think coming at it as a relative outsider, again, that's been one of the sort of lovely discoveries as being part of this project, is just sort of understanding the amount of people that, you know, I'll say, you know, because I've been a jobbing actor since I've been 21 years old. I'm 35 now, and you know, occasionally friends, family will check in and be like, "Hey, you got anything coming out? You know, you're doing this, you're doing that," and I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm doing this." I'll be excited about it, and they've never heard of it, or you know, like, you know, I have to sort of pitch them on it, you know. And this is the first time that I've been like, "I'm doing this thing. It's called Reacher," and they're like, "You mean Jack Reacher?" I'm like, "Yeah." And instantly, there's that recognition. People that, you know, people I wouldn't have even expected to have like loved the books and, you know, felt, you know, passionately about the casting of the movies, and that, you know, like all this sort of impassioned love of this character. That's been a real joy to discover and to sort of accidentally be a part of. And on a more personal note, so both my mother and father sadly passed away when I was still in my 20s. And my father always used to read non-fiction. He was always reading these boring books about like Roman Britain and blah, blah, blah. And my wife happened to find his Kindle. I was up, it was the first week I was shooting Reacher. And he had one fiction title in his whole library. She loaded it up by accident. She thought it was her own Kindle. And the only fiction book that he had, and it was one of the last things he ever read, was The Killing Floor by Jack Reacher. So for me, you know, actors naturally sort of superstitious, and we believe in kismet, and it's, I think, one of the ways in which we try and make sense of a sort of chaotic career and industry. But I really feel like it was meant to be. And it was so lovely to know that my dad would be really stoked that I was part of a story that he gave his own time and attention to. So yeah.
That's amazing. That's basically like fate in a way that you landed this role.
It does seem a bit like that. Yeah. Yeah, it was lovely and weird, and it's, you know, it really did happen. It actually did happen. And of course, as soon as my wife told me that, well, the first thing I did was like, I think I sat down and sort of stared at the wall for a bit, and I was a bit weirded out. And then I called Nick Santora, who's the showrunner and the writer of the show, and I was like, Nick, I just wanted to share this with you, and he was very touched by it as well. So yeah, no, it was nice. Now, of course, I think my dad probably would have liked it if I'd been the good guy, or one of the good guys, as opposed to one of the baddies. But you know, beggars can't be choosers.
It's okay. You're in it. That's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly.
But speaking about your character, KJ, could you tell us a little bit about him and what it was like kind of bringing him to life?
Well, put it this way, I see my character as you know, Jack Reacher is the archetypal American hero, in that it's not, he's stupid, far from it. He's actually quite intelligent, but he has that wonderful ability to just be able to brawn his way through things, and he is I think there's an underlying, I think the whole story really is about bullying, and he's the guy that comes and bullies the bully, you know, and my character KJ is very much the bully. And I sort of read his part of the story as kind of Reacher's shadow. Obviously, we're both similar colouring. I wouldn't say that we're both similar looking, because Alan has about 150 pounds on me. But yes, but then I think there's something to the physicality of the character as well, and that, like, I'm quite slight, and I'm quite, you know, I look quite, I think, elegant in it, and there's a poise and a calculation which I was trying to sort of play opposite Alan's just sheer physicality. And in terms of his wider role within the story, I mean, in a nutshell, the story is about how Jack Reacher has come to this town of Margrave in Georgia pretty much on a whim, although we later discover that there might be some that he might have detected a hint of trouble to do with a member of his family. So he's come there with no money in his pocket, like a couple $100, and like the clothes that he's wearing, and that's pretty much it. And on the flip side of that, you have my character, who's well entrenched in this community. He's actually an outsider like Reacher. He's originally from the Midwest, and he's the son of the kind of town's corporate benefactor, corporate overlord. And so where Reacher is earthy, KJ is privileged, and where Reacher is all about fighting for the underdog, KJ and his father sort of represent the force of the town, which is all about sort of oppressing the underdog. And I think I'll just leave it there. because I don't want to reveal too much. But yes, there is a moral ambiguity to Reacher. I think that's one of the reasons we find him interesting. But at the same time, I do feel like he operates against a backdrop of sort of a greater darkness, and KJ, to put it mildly, is certainly caught up in that. So that's where the sort of the chessboard lies when Reacher shows up in town, and KJ is very much ingrained in the sort of forces of wickedness kind of opposing him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this show is action-packed. I'm wondering, did you have to do any stunt training or training with Alan?
Yes, I did. Thankfully, not too much. Alan and I have we have a couple of little fights together, and yeah, so we had a great stunt team, and I spent quite a bit of time training with them, just to make sure that, you know, various strikes and hits are safe on, you know, that you're warmed up, safe on the neck. And there's a scene that I think has actually made it into the trailer, where we have a bit of a confrontation in a diner, and Alan backhands me after I say something disparaging about the girl that he's Willa's character. He's sort of struck up a friendship with. And obviously, you know, so Alan's very good and a gentleman, and so, you know, doesn't actually make contact with me, but I'm trying to sell, you know, to be backhanded by somebody who's like, you know, 270 pounds, like, you know, I'm trying to sell it. So I fling myself out the chair and like whip my neck around, and I land squarely on this like wooden floor, and I get up again, and my stunt double Maxime comes over to me and he's like, dude, that looked great, like, do you want some pants? You don't have pants. And I'm like, nah, I'm fine, man. Don't worry. Like, thinking that, like, you know, that was a one take wonder. We're only going to do it once or twice. Well, we did that take in various different forms about 7 or 8 times. And because I'd sort of said like, oh, I want the padding, felt like I couldn't really like wimp out and be like, can I have the padding? And I was so sore by the end of that. I limped out, and just, I looked like I'd been in a car accident. I had like bruising all down my side, and Maxime saw me getting changed, and he was like, bro, never say no to the pads again. And I was like, yeah. So the second time I had a fight with Alan, I was like, get the pads on me, man. And sure enough, like there was one take where he has to tackle me. And I think Alan used to play football, but it was just like being hit by a train. I mean, it was just, it was like, and he pulled it. You know, he wasn't going full hog. So yeah, no, it was. Needless to say, it was a little bit intimidating, and like that some of the crew were giving me a bit of shit about like, have you got your affairs in order? You got your will sorted out? But no, it turned out to be fine, because all of this, you know, all good stunt choreography is just that, it's choreography. It's like a dance, you know. So his bulk aside, it was fine.
I mean, you definitely learned your lesson about wearing the pads in any future you have.
Exactly, and it's stupid male pride as well. You know, it's just this thing of, nah, I'm hard, mate. I'm hard. Don't worry about me. Yeah, I'm hard. And then it's like, it's a bit. I go home and, like, you know, FaceTime my wife. I'm like, look at the bruise.
Yeah, it was a hard day at work, definitely.
Exactly.
But besides being beaten and bruised, do you have a favorite memory from your time on set?
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice question. I mean, I have a couple. I mean, it was, I think, probably the first time we drove onto the back lot at Pickering. Just to give a bit of context, that Pickering is, funnily enough, we were talking just before this interview, your old neighborhood where you're from, and it's fascinating that happened to be the place where Amazon purchased this lot, and proceeded to build a fake town. It is a town that, to all intents and purposes, is a picturesque southern, a slightly too picturesque, and that's important because there is something kind of manicured about about Margrave, which is a big part of the story. But yeah, they constructed this set in a field in Canada, and there are a number of times, just as a quick side note, where like it's supposed to be a balmy southern day in Georgia, and it was about 55 degrees, and it was blowing, and it was cold, and so I'm trying not to shiver and be like, yeah, this beautiful sun. But the first time that I was driven onto the backlot was incredible, because I came up doing theatre, and that's where, if you're lucky, you have an actor that plays the backdrop, like an actor who's like, oh, I'm a skyscraper, or somebody's painted something and it's passable. But the difference between big budget television and that is well, the two don't compare. And so you actually enter this world that you've read about, and the fine details, just like the fonts of the stores, and the props that are in the storefront, and they built an actual diner, and like complete with, it was a 50s style diner. It looked like it was from the 1950s, and they just built it new. So that was a really magical moment. And there was also there's a I can't talk about the second one, because that's spoilers in terms of like where it ends and where the final fight is. But yeah, I think that'll do. I think, yeah, the first time at Pickering Backlot was amazing.
I mean, after being in the Canadian weather, have you decided if you're just gonna move to Canada for all of your roles you have?
Yeah, of course. No, look, Canada's cool, man. It's there's a lot of skilled crew in Toronto in particular, and I think, aside from the tax incentives and stuff, there's a lot of reasons why things shoot up there. It's because things can get done reliably, and it's essentially, it's North America. It could be anywhere in North America, which is both a good thing and a bad thing at points. But I'm a big fan. I've put it this way: over the last 3 years, I've spent a long time in Toronto and its environment, and its environs, and the Toronto restaurant scene. I've got my favourites now. So shout out to Nut Bar. They got me many a smoothie when I was trying to stay fit and healthy. So yeah, I got to know the place very well.
Yeah, they definitely have a good variety of food downtown, so I completely understand what you're saying. But
great Thai food in Toronto. Really, really good Thai food.
oh yeah. If you could describe this series in 3 words, what would they be?
Satisfying, action packed. That's kind of a compound word, but I hope you'll let me have it. Satisfying, action packed, and redemptive.
Okay.
Yeah, redemptive. I think it's a struggle of good versus evil, and I think there's. I think people will find it. I'll change that last one. I think it's cathartic. There you go. Cathartic. Okay. It's a cathartic experience. Yeah.
My last question for you. Do you have any future projects that you can hint at or talk about?
No, I can't talk about any of them. But some things in the pipeline potentially. You don't want to. I'm still somewhat superstitious, I think, and just like, until I'm actually like on set and I'm there and I'm doing it, the whole thing is just it's just potential, and no, I'm excited to see what the future brings, and it will be interesting to see how this particular character is interpreted. Like I say, I've become, the last couple of projects I've worked on, I've been playing villains, bad guys, and I'll be interested to see whether I'll ever be able to break out of that. It's not a bad mold to be in. I'm not complaining. It actually allows me to. Often I get to say the things that you're not allowed to say, or I get to be wicked. I get to channel that dark energy that we all have. and that's quite fun. But I suppose it would be interesting to see if I could branch away from that and do something where I don't end up murdering people.
I mean,
You'll
be a good guy.
My problem is I think my face is I have quite an intense sort of look to me, and I can't change my eyes. Do you know what I mean? I can't change my facial structure. And so I'll sometimes be working on material, you know, on a tape or something with my wife, and I'll be like, is that good? Am I coming across sweet and romantic? And she's like, no, you're coming across like a maniac. Like, I wasn't even trying, man.
It's just how you look, but maybe you'll be a good guy one day.
Maybe I'll get to be the good guy one day. Yeah. Who knows?
But yeah, thank you so much for doing this interview. It was so great to talk to you and meet you.
Oh, thanks, Gracie. Yeah, likewise.